Hi, and welcome back to the Shane Plays Out of the Abyss Notes series, where I give my notes and thoughts as I run my group of intrepid party members, adventurers, through Out of the Abyss, the 5th edition Underdark adventure at my friendly local game store. Again, if you're a new viewer, if you're a new viewer, you wouldn't be like, again. So, for new viewers, this is not an actual play. This is just my notes and thoughts and kind of a summary on each session, not only on running Out of the Abyss as an adventure, but also just DMing in general and D&D rules and RPG thoughts and that sort of thing. If you're a returning viewer, thanks so much. Really appreciate you and all your views and comments and all of that good stuff. So moving right along, let's dig right into viewer feedback. So let me put on my +3 spectacles of viewer feedback, and away we shall go. We actually had quite a bit of feedback on video 61 when we were in Araj, the Tower of Vengeance, talking with Vizeran, the drow archmage who wants to help the players, or at least ally with the players, but in reality just wants to use the whole situation to wipe out Minzo Baranzan, the drow city in the Underdark. So here we go. First comment was from Visely Crisson, and last video I talked a little bit about one of the methods that I use to encourage players to pay attention to what's going on in the game and to be able to recap at the beginning of a session. And what I do is everybody rolls a d20, and then whoever rolls the lowest gives a recap of the previous session, and then they can get XP. I'll award between 1 and 100 XP points for that. And one of my players, it just, they don't like to do it. And they're like, well, I just, I work and I play in other D&D games and I don't really remember everything. And my counterpoint is, I expect everybody who's playing to do their best to be aware of what's going on in the game and be aware of the other players and characters. And in addition to your own, I think that's part of the agreement, the unspoken agreement, if you will, when we come together for a group experience. So, and just kind of took it from there. And so we had a couple of comments on that in this most recent video. Now, Vasily said, I don't make the players recap, but I do spend time writing a session summary after every session in a living Google document and expect them to read it if they don't remember the last session or miss the session. If they do not read it, it is clear that I will not spend any time filling them in because I dedicate so much of my personal time to write those recaps for their benefit. So far, it has worked for us. And I mean, that's great. Vasily, if you want to do that, and in my response on the YouTube comments, I said, let me say in advance, every DM group has their own dynamic, and whatever works for them works for them. For me personally, I do want to have that little bit of encouragement for players to be responsible on their own for being aware of what's going on and being able to, within reason, I mean, they don't have to give me a detailed report in triplicate, but at least be able to give me some broad strokes of what happened the previous session. And by the way, one of the reasons we do the recap is so that people who missed the previous session or whatever can also kind of be brought up to speed. Now, but now one thing I did mention to Vasily, and again, if somebody out there, if you're a DM and you want to write up like a journal or a recap for your players of what happens in each session, there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing intrinsically wrong with that. I do not do that personally. I do not want to encourage the players to think of me as their personal assistant, right? Now I may have journals and thoughts and notes that I use for my own personal reference, but one, I don't have time, between working full time, running the game, making videos like this, doing my radio show, doing my podcast, my blog, all this stuff. I just simply don't have time to do a detailed write-up. The time I would have to do that is usually what I put into preparing for the next session. But also I don't want to relieve them of the responsibility of staying current. And I feel the more they invest mentally, that's the more they'll engage with the game and in the group. But having said that, there are things that, as the DM, it's up to me to research and respond to when questions and comments and rulings, come up. So again, if Vasily or somebody else, if y'all want to keep a journal for the whole party and all that's fine. Go ahead, go right. A lot of groups do that. I just personally don't, because I think that there's, and I've seen this with groups I've run and other groups I've been in where, the DM or the GM will start being used by the players almost as like their secretary or their assistant or something like that. And I don't like to encourage that. I don't want to relieve players of individual responsibility that they have to the game. So, had a question from Sammy Browntube, and said, what do I need to run this campaign besides the main book? And, it's a good question. We forget that, maybe there's people watching D&D videos online that, maybe they're not as familiar with D&D as like me. I've been playing since like the 80s. Really, Sammy and anybody else who's watching this, any adventure that you're running for D&D, whether it's a pre-purchased adventure like Out of the Abyss, or whether it's something you come up with or whatever. In addition to that, what you need is you need the core rule books. There's 3 rule books for D&D that are basically, you pretty much need them to do an ongoing campaign or adventure or whatever. And that's the Player's Handbook, the Dungeon Master's Guide, and the Monster Manual. Now, I will say that you could possibly, for short periods of time or for certain adventures, get by without the Dungeon Master's Guide or the Monster Manual, but you've definitely got to have the Player's Handbook because that's got all the engine and rules and all that of the game. And there's also a free version of D&D online from at Wizards of the Coast, and that has a lot of the core rules in it as well. But if you're going to play D&D, you really need those 3 books. If you're a DM, if you're a player, you definitely need the Player's Handbook, or at least have access to one, because it's got all the rules of the game and how, what class can I be, what race can I be, and all of that good stuff. So let's see what else we got here. Okay, there was a lot of stuff on Blackrazor, which I'm going to come back to because there were several comments on Blackrazor. I want to address all those one at a time. Blackrazor. Okay, Rob Plummer said, I agree with your assessment when it comes to this adventure, wanting you to figure out some of the components. And what he's talking about is, in the last chapter or the last video we were talking about in the Tower of Vengeance, when you're talking with Vizeran, it gives you this crazy shopping list of ingredients for this dark heart thing that Vizeran wants to make to do a talisman, so he could perform a ritual and attract all the demon lords to one place and let them fight it out. And then they kill each other, and the ones that are left over are still weakened, so then the players have a chance to take them out and get rid of the demon lords and send them back to the abyss. So he's agreeing, in a couple of those components, the book just said, I'll figure it out for yourself, like where to get these and how to get these. And I'm like, not good enough. That's I don't like that. I mean, this has a retail value, this book, of $50 on it. Now, most people probably aren't going to pay $50 by the time they buy it wherever, but they're probably going to pay at least 30 or 40. And some people probably paid, cover price for this book. And no, that's not good enough from an official polished, product from Wizards of the Coast that I'm buying as a DM so that I can run an adventure. Don't tell me, hey, you need to get the blood and ichor of a demon lord. Opportunities might present themselves in the adventure. No, not good enough. It gave me a list of ingredients, and almost every one of them said, this can be found here, this can be found here, this can be, but these two, and I think the other one was the Tamask mushrooms that grow in the footprint of of certain types of demons, and then the ichor, or the blood of a demon lord. It'll just, some opportunity will come up. Not good enough. I mean, I call major on that. Was not impressed with that. So anyway, so Rob said, I have to say, the longer I play through this adventure, the more I'm disappointed in it. Although I felt at the beginning this had epic possibilities, however, I'm using the ideas that Elven Tower gave in his notes for the rest of the ingredients. Yeah, and Elven Tower, again, I've gotten to where I mention Elven Tower in almost every video for Out of the Abyss. They have a wonderful, go to elventower.com, and they have a wonderful adventures or adventure guide or walkthrough, thoughts, notes, chapter by chapter for Out of the Abyss. And there's a PDF version on the DM's Guild that I read, you might want to check out. So same stuff on the website, but it's all collected into a handy dandy PDF version. So, and then I just said, well, there's a lot of great ideas, themes, and moments in Out of the Abyss, but it does require more user assembly than I expected. There's several parts, especially like we've talked before, Grackle Stug, and you're just it's all over the place, and you've really got to spend time investing in it, or use somebody else's notes and guides to make it work well. So it's almost like, parts of the adventure are like a scale model kit that all the parts are there, but you got to kind of glue them together to make them work. And I expect more out of a $50 adventure. I want it all laid out. That's why I'm spending 30, 40, $50 or whatever. So, okay. Now Michael Miska said, I have actually stolen, your review with the XP award. And that's where he's talking about, where I'm like, okay, let's roll. And whoever, does whatever has to recap, and you get a certain amount of XP based on how well you recap. He said, but he gives out up to 10% of the current level's worth of XP. Wow, that's pretty big incentive. It says the players actually volunteer instead of rolling, and the extra reward really keeps the players excited at higher levels. Okay, so there's a lot of cool stuff there. There's a couple of cool things going on there. You got your players excited. They want to recap. And at higher levels, they're loving that XP award to help them, keep climbing up the XP ladder. And I also want to say that I got the idea for the, roll and then recap and then give an XP award from somebody else. I can't remember who. I was out researching D&D, or I think I was researching for Out of the Abyss and was reading somebody. I wish I could remember who it was so I could give them credit. So Michael, you're stealing something that has already been, I said, you're stealing that which is already stolen. So, they say there's no great ideas out there. There's just repurposed ideas or something. So, so he says your version, or I said, your version is a fun way of doing it to alleviate the hesitancy for players who are not naturally wanting to participate. But I like to keep it random with the die. I don't want people volunteering. And the reason is because then it kind of, for me personally, it gets rid of one of the advantages to the system that I do, that you have a chance of participating whether you like it or not. And that way it helps keep encouraging everybody to try to remember. Because if you know that, hey man, there's this great XP award, and so somebody's going to volunteer to do it, I don't have to worry about it. So if you're the player that doesn't want to do it, and then I lose that element of helping encourage everybody to stay involved, and to potentially recap. So another reason that I do it, and I haven't mentioned it a lot, and it's very much a secondary reason, not a main reason. It's to help the naturally quiet / wallflower person, learn to overcome the reluctance to be in the spotlight. D&D is a group game that has helped a lot of people become more social and overcome social anxiety. So it's a slight amount of exposure therapy for me as well. And again, if there's genuine issues, like mental problems or something, I won't require participation. But if it's just, I don't like to do it, and I work and I play in other D&D games, so I can't keep everything straight, that's not going to carry any weight with me. I'm like, sorry, all I can deal with is this game. Okay. Valendrave said, Shane, not sure if you knew this or not, and I didn't know this. This is really cool. Vizeran is the same drow that created the 4 magical weapons that the prophets of the elemental cults use in the Princess of the Apocalypse campaign adventure. I didn't know that. That's one of the, I think you had like Horde of the Dragon Queen. There was a couple of interconnected adventures that came out for 5th edition. I always forget the name of them. One of them is Horde of the Dragon Queen, and the other one is Rise of Tiamat, I think. And then you had Princes of the Apocalypse, which was kind of the 5th edition version of Temple of Elemental Evil taken to a much larger level. And then you started getting like Out of the Abyss and Storm King's Thunder, and now in Curse of Strahd and Tomb of Annihilation. But so Princes of the Apocalypse, evidently Vizeran, is the NPC Drow Archmage that the players are currently allied with in Out of the Abyss, is the same Drow that created the 4 magical weapons that the prophets of the elemental cults used in Princes of the Apocalypse. I did not know that. So Valendrave says, I'm running a few of the published campaigns simultaneously and plan on connecting the 2 events through this character. That's pretty neat. If you have plans for running Princes of the Apocalypse, maybe this would be a good time to start dropping nuggets. Keep it real. All right, man, Valendrave, keep it real back at you. Appreciate it. That was a cool note. I was not aware. And now myself and others are. And then we had a note from Greg Banks. Said, Shane, longtime listener, first time commenting. Cool, man. Appreciate it. I listen at work and appreciate your feedback and experience. I know you're halfway through the campaign, but wondered if you had seen the third-party Underworld Races and Classes book put out by Adventure a Week. I'm considering running Out of the Abyss and or Rise of the Drow when it's converted to the 5th edition, and wondered if adding this on for additional flavor would be too much. Let me know your thoughts, and love the show. Man, appreciate it. And then he also had a follow-up comment, said, also as a tangent, I was a Kickstarter for Villains of Vigilantes 3.0 / Mighty Protectors. Villain Vigilantes. I was actually a Villains of Vigilantes player and fan before I actually really got heavy into D&D. That's the Jeff D. and Jack Herman superhero game. It wasn't the very first superhero game, but it was one of the first, and I know it was like the first of something. And I've actually had the pleasure of interviewing Jeff D. and Jack Herman a couple of times on my radio show. And Jeff D., by the way, did a lot of the art for old school D&D. I love Jeff D.'s art. And anytime I see it, it just brings me back to my childhood. But anyway, VMV 3.0 Mighty Protectors was hoping you might come back around for further review and playthrough notes in the future when you get the chance. Smiley face. So I'd love to, Greg, if I can find the time and get my hands on it, or as far as a group to play it, then it would be fun at least to do one shots or something and talk about it a little bit. So, and appreciate you listening and commenting on on your question about the third part, that Underworld Races and Classes book from Adventure Week. I haven't seen that, so I can't comment directly, but in general, I tend to stay away from non-official rules for my games. Even stuff from Wizards of the Coast that hasn't been play tested, like Unearthed Arcana articles. So that doesn't mean you can. If you think it fits and you're go for it. I just usually don't, because I don't like that, to get bit in the butt by trying to be nice. Like, hey, can I, a player approaches me, can I use this whatever from this source? And you kind of look at it, and man, let's be honest, most DMs don't have time to go off and research for 3 hours on every, you're like, you kind of look at it and you're like, okay, I think that'd be okay. And then 3 sessions in, and it's unbalanced, or it doesn't fit well, or whatever, but you've said yes, so you don't want to take it away. And so I just usually don't. I just make a kind of a rule that to make things easy, especially at the store, because I got so many different people coming. Some of them may be friends, some of them may be acquaintances, some people may be just jumping in. To keep things easy, I say Player's Handbook, Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide, and now Xanathar's Guide to Everything. So those are, if it's in there, it's probably okay, race, class-wise, and all that. If it's not in one of those 3, then probably not. Volos, I'm not even really, they have notes for converting monsters to player characters. I'm not even really doing a lot of Volos or anything. So, and they come to me with something on the Unearthed Arcana article, and I'm like, no, because it hasn't. When they throw stuff on Unearthed Arcana, that is thoughts cool. They're throwing it out there to the community, looking for feedback, and most of that stuff isn't player ready yet. Although I do understand that, on Unearthed Arcana, there was a Ranger version that was better balanced than the Player's Handbook version of the Ranger. So there could be exceptions. So, but anyway, that's kind of my thought on it in general. Greg, and thanks for watching and listening. And, please feel free to comment in the future. Now, we're going to go back to Blackrazor, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because there's a lot of comments and we're already at 20 minutes into the video. Like I said, we had a lot of viewer feedback this time, but we had several people comment on Blackrazor, and the question was that my players brought up, and I'm still researching this, was could Blackrazor, the legendary weapon that really should be an artifact from White Plume Mountain, it's been legendary since first edition D&D. I mean, it's just still with us. And by the way, in Xanathar's Guide to Everything, one of the subclasses for Warlock is called a Hexblade, and it can use certain types of weapons as its patron, and Blackrazor is one of them. That blows me. Blackrazor can be a patron to a Warlock because a Hexblade can use weapons that were created from Essence of the Shadowfell as patrons, and that Blackrazor in 5th edition was created from Essence of the Shadowfell. I don't think that was the original thing way back in the day, but that's how it is now. So, wow, pretty cool. Okay, so let's get the Blackrazor stuff. Oh yeah, and so the question came up by my players: could Blackrazor eat a Demon Lord's soul? And it's like, wow. So I've thrown that out on Facebook in the D&D and the 5th edition D&D group on Facebook. I think I put it out in the Out of the Abyss DMs group. I put it on Twitter, kind of thrown it around there. I put it on YouTube here, and wow, a lot of really great thoughts. A lot of people are like, no, because they don't have souls. A lot of people are like, yes, but it would affect Blackrazor somehow. Other people are like, not on the prime material plane, but in the abyss. Other people are like, demons are soul, period. So yes, but it would affect, it would physically suck them up too. I mean, there's all these great thoughts. I'm still percolating everything, and I probably know in my mind how it would go now, but the players would have to try to find out. I'm not going to tell them what I think would happen, and it could be nothing at all, or it could be something amazing. They would just have to wait and see and try it. But Nicholas, just go check out the comments on video 61. Nicholas McCarty said, I like the sword idea and would personally let it take a Demon Lord's soul. I'd probably restrict it to just one Demon Lord, though, so it would make the party think which one could they capture, etc. And then, they would give maybe an ability of the Demon Lord to the wielder through, depending on which Demon Lord was sucked up. Visali Christen said, that is definitely using the rule of cool. My thoughts on this are that Demon Lords don't die in the material plane. That's true. So their souls can't be consumed unless they are killed while in the abyss. The book is clear that when you defeat a Demon Lord, they actually don't die and are just sent back. I don't know the verbatim for Blackrazor, but I suspect it says that when you kill an enemy with it, you steal their soul. This would mean to me that you're not able to take any Demon Lord's soul, especially a Demon Lord, on the prime material plane. Anyway, I'm going to add into that. Then Valendrave said, I'd probably have Blackrazor grow drunk on the power of Demon Lords and become insistent that the wielder find more. Perfect way to give the PC a reason to want to return Blackrazor to its original owner and get it out of your campaign. So Valendrave's like, get it out of the campaign. And in our campaign, it's sort of soft deleted for the moment because it's in the armory, the vault of the guild, because nobody wants to deal with it. In fact, the original player who found it in White Plume Mountain wanted to find some lava and toss it into lava. So, nobody likes Blackrazor in this party anyway. And I did, I played Blackrazor like, a jerk, a very powerful jerk, but there are definitely downsides coming to using Blackrazor's power. And Blackrazor will eventually eat you if it wants to, if it could. It really just wants souls, and it wants somebody to facilitate that. And at the end of the day, it wants to eat every soul in the multiverse. So I think we have some more comments here on Blackrazor. Yeah, Rob Plummer said, something to keep in mind is that they are not in the Abyss in this adventure, so I would rule not while on this plane. Now in the Abyss, it's fair game. He said it's also interesting that your players still have the sentient weapons, and he goes on to talk about that his group, again, like Valendrave was recommending, Rob's group searched out and returned these to their previous owners. Now, in my campaign, they can't, because the way I kind of altered White Plume Mountain's backstory a little bit to where it was hundreds, if not thousands of years ago, and the original owners aren't around anymore. And White Plume Mountain had just become this legendary dungeon for people to try to attempt for bragging rights and prestige and glory. And then finally the party did it, but they lost 2 or 3 party members doing it. And then they've attracted the attention of the Red Wizards of Thay along the way, which we will deal with in the future. So anyway, so he tells some funny or gives some funny notes on how he would handle it. If the players kept carrying these weapons. So let's see if I'm missing anything else. I think that's it. Thank you everybody for commenting, but I'm going to move this on because this has been quite a long viewer feedback segment. One thing I will say is, and I'm not going to get into it here, but if you go to video 22 in the series, I had a comment from Chiquiko Soatome, and they were talking about when and to allow characters or players to introduce new characters, saying he acknowledges, or whoever acknowledges that, I'm kind of firm on, hey, we're not just going to keep introducing new characters willy-nilly. And he offered some thoughts on, maybe consider doing it this way. And then, I offered my thoughts back. So if you're curious about that conversation, you can go to video 22. So that's it on viewer feedback. Thanks again, everybody, for your feedback. I appreciate it very much. So let's get into the previous session now. I did mention that I've spent a lot of time reading through Xanathars. I'm still kind of working on it. A review is still coming if you're interested in that. But I did tell my party, after looking at the races and subclasses and everything, or the classes and all of that, I don't think there's any new races, that I feel like Xanathars is okay. And we're going to start officially using it in our group. Now I do reserve the right, because since it's still fairly new, that if something ends up being very OP, I reserve the right to reverse a decision on individual elements of Xanathars. So that's kind of where we're at. So we were at the end of last session. They were still in the Tower of Vengeance, a Raj, with one of my cats just sneezed, with Vizeran, the vengeful Drow Archmage, and they were going through the list of components, and one of the things that is required, and one of the players pointed out, and I need to give Chris Perkins or whoever a hard time about this, one of the writers of the adventure, but we were going back through the ingredients and the components, and one of the things is 13 Tamasks, also known as Devil's Mushrooms, sprouted from the footprint of a Marilith, a Balor, or a Goristro, to allure to draw demons in. And one of my players said, yeah, kind of raised their hand, and I'm like, yes. And they're like, you do realize that a Marilith has the bottom parts of a snake, so how would they leave a footprint? And I'm like, so score 1 to my player. I still need to go verify that, but if that's true, then score 1 to my player, and score -1 to Wizards of the Coast for their proofreading or thinking, like connecting stuff. But anyway, so just so if you care. And then of course we had to have, because it's D&D and it's a role-playing group, we had to have a discussion on some snakes have little vestigial little feetsies. So it's possible they could leave some kind of footprint, but anyway, so for the Maribeth, it might be a slither print. I don't know. Still have to go verify that. I may throw up a picture while editing this video, whether if there's snakes in the bottom or not. So they were literally still talking with Vizeran. So let's go back. Let's go back into the Abyss and pick up where we left off. In this video, we will wrap up the Tower of Vengeance and then head into the Wormwrithings, which that's fun to say. The Wormwrithings. Okay, so one thing that I forgot to talk about last video was some help that Vizeran offers to the players. And there's some things that Vizeran does. It's on page 164 that he gives the players. One, he gives each character a drow pewafwi, which is basically the drow version of a cloak of elven kind. Each character will be provided with an amulet that can be used one time as a scroll of protection from fiends. Of course, we talked about last time that Vizeran offers the use of Araj as a safe haven in the Underdark as long as his alliance with the characters lasts. The Archmage won't countenance an army being housed within his home, but he opens it to the adventurers and their allies as they need it. And in fact, the group decided to establish an outpost there as they're moving around, using the outpost rules or whatever, that we've discussed previously, and that are kind of unique. It's a new downtime activity establishing out of the abyss. And this is most important of all, Vizeran can offer a plan to defeat the demon lords, which we've already talked about. So just wanted to make sure to highlight that from page 164. So basically, we ended the session before with, he dropped this massive, crazy shopping list on them of stuff that they've got to get so he can make this dark heart talisman so that they can do the ritual to attract all the demon lords and have them fight and kill each other. And the ones that are left over are weakened, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And, the players are like, and, one of my players was like, that list is burned into my soul, because it's so crazy. And in fact, a couple of things like the ichor of the demon lord and those Tamask from a footprint or a slither print, the book's just like, you'll figure it out somewhere. I'm still blown away by that. But the other stuff is very specifically, says, you can get this here and this here and this here. So most of the ingredients are, Vizeran can say, here's where you go get this stuff. And the two that make the most sense to begin with are, let's see, the purple worm egg and the eye of the beholder, because those can be found in the Wormwrithings, and the Wormwrithings are very close to his tower, his cavern where his tower is at. And then the next logical place after that would be to get the angel feathers and the demon heart in the labyrinth. And you're going to have to go to Minzo Baranzan to get, Gromph's notes in his grimoire. And then the other two things you just depend, the Tamask mushrooms and the blood from a demon lord depends on the adventurer's resourcefulness and on the opportunities found in the other chapters of the adventure. I'm going to try not to keep harping that, but boy, that bugs me. Okay. Anyway. So really, the players can go where they want. It's sandbox, because that's everything has to be a sandbox. I can do whatever I don't restrict me, man. Well, if you want to save the Underdark and the entire surface world and basically this entire planet from the demon lords and possibly even this entire plane of existence, you'll probably want to go next to the Wormwrithings or the Labyrinth. Most likely the Wormwrithings, because that's the closest. And then after that, you want to go to the Labyrinth and yada, yada, yada. So, of course, my players, let's go to the Wormwrithings. So before they get to the Wormwrithings, I'll give you some notes on other stuff we did. So one thing that I introduced, this is just something I came up with. I would encourage you to do something similar, but, salt to taste, if you will. I basically had Vizeran give them like a wand. And it's not a wand in the traditional sense of like Alakabama, and then, you do whatever, Arkakaslama, Mekalekahai, Mekahini. No, it's a wand-like magical device, that there is a sort of a ritual that goes along with it, that, it's not just an instant action. It takes a few minutes to do this, and it will teleport basically the party and a certain amount of creatures and characters within a certain dimensions. I kind of left that loose, but basically the expedition if it packs into a close enough space, can be teleported back to the cavern of the Tower of Vengeance. So as they're collecting items, or if for some reason they need to come back, they can get back quickly. And that's not in the book. That's just something I introduced, and it can be used to teleport again, but it will only send you right back to where you originally teleported from. So say you're in the Wormwrithings and you teleport back to the Tower of Mirage. If you teleport out of the Tower of Mirage, you will only go back to where you originally cast it. Now, one of the questions that one of my players had, which was a good question, was, well, then we just physically leave the Tower of Vengeance and then teleport back again without having to teleport from the Tower of Vengeance? And I'm like, yes, you can. But if you ever teleport away, if you use this ritual and this wand to teleport while you're in that cavern, then you will go back to where you teleported from to get back to the Tower of Vengeance. Hope that makes sense. And the reason that this is, one, I wanted to give them a way to move around quickly because they don't have a teleport spell right now. And, there's a lot of moving around in the Underdark. But two, he's like, look, it's extremely difficult to teleport in the Underdark. And a lot of that's because of all the Fair's Rest and everything. So the Fair's Rest, that magical energy that permeates the Underdark, which also remember that if they cast spells inside the Fair's Rest, you can get a wild magic effect and just all kinds of other stuff. And it's also what's facilitating the spread of madness in the Underdark currently. But in general, the Fair's Rest is just all over the Underdark, and it can interfere with scrying and teleporting. So he's, in order to teleport accurately, it has to be a very specific from here to here, and then from here back to there. And that's why, it takes all this, you got to have this little wand thing, and you got to do this ritual, which he taught to the Warlock in game wise, but really the whole party knows. And we called it a Wand of Limited Underdark Teleportation. Actually, joking around, we called it a Wand of Limited Vengeancy Underdark Teleportation because Vizeran's all about vengeance. And it's the Tower of Vengeance and all that. So it's Vengeancy Underdark Limited Vengeancy Underdark Teleportation. So feel free to steal that. I don't consider it even stealing because, I just made it up and I'm throwing these notes out there for people to use. So please take that and use that if that will help your campaign. Also, Vizeran, I don't think it says this straight in the book, but I think it's kind of implied. I went ahead and just threw it out there. I said, Vizeran is going to prepare, meditate, study, rest, etc., to prepare for the incredible difficult ritual of once he gets the dark heart and all that. This is a long thing to get ready for. I mean, he's messing with demon lords and this and that. So that's sort of the narrative reason why he doesn't just go with the party and help collect all this stuff. And as the party's leaving, they agree to everything. And as they're leaving, Grin, remember he's the NPC, the drow mage apprentice of Vizeran. Pay attention to him. Make sure to introduce him to the party so they know kind of who he is, because he's going to come back up in a very important plot twist in chapter 15, according to what I've read. So make sure to introduce him to the party. And he gave them the map. And in the map to the Tower of Vengeance is described in the Tower of Vengeance chapter, how it works, how it can get them through the secret tunnel and all that. And that's in case for, like, maybe they lose the rod, or maybe there's some reason why they physically need to come back. Instead of teleporting back, they have the map in case they need it, which will not only get them to the Tower of Vengeance, but will get them through the secret door to get them into the Tower of Vengeance. So, and again, they established an outpost. They left a couple of their NPCs. I think their Order of the Gauntlet, I think it was the Order of the Gauntlet, a couple of those NPCs. And, we said that you could probably, because I think before we said for an outpost, even though it says in the book, we were using common sense, you need at least 3 or 4 people to maintain a constant guard and watch in an outpost. Well, they're safer for the moment in the cavern of the Tower of Vengeance. So they left just 2. And it's whatever I think it's the Order of the Gauntlet. But anyway, it's whatever group wants to be their honor guard. And the reason they did that was because they wanted to leave behind people that had good ethics and morals, because here they are leaving them in Vizeran's, cavern. So, they decided that would be good people to leave. They definitely didn't want to leave the Zentarum and stuff like that. So you've got another outpost there with the Sending Stones. So now they have Sending Stones at Gontalgrim. They have another outpost. that they established before they got to the library of Graven Hollow. Now they have this outpost at in the Tower of Vengeance area, and then they have their expedition that has sending stones. So it's continuing lines of communication. And now they can teleport back to Vizeran's cavern, which is cool. Now, one of the questions that came up is like, well, if we establish an outpost there, how do they get in and out? Because it's all secret doorsy and all that stuff. And I was like, well, maybe they can work something out with Vizeran or whatever. But they decided, not to overthink it. And they just left a couple of characters there in an outpost. And it's also, maybe a Vizeran or Grin, this NPC mage apprentice, needs to pass notes or whatever. So that's what they decided to do. So when they left, because we've had a couple of sessions with not a lot of combat and whatnot. And I said, hey, I need a marching order and give me a description of how the expedition's being set up. Now, another thing, so I got that, made sure to get that, to get back into that thinking mode, because now they're traveling to the Underdark again, and I'd pretty much montaged it previously, last couple of sessions. We also discussed that Vizeran is likely evil. That came up among the party members, and, you want to present Vizeran, this Drow Archmage who has it in for Menzoberranzan, as a genuine ally. They've done perception checks and insight checks. I mean, he's a genuine ally, but he would also sacrifice this party for his own ends if he needed to in a heartbeat. And really his ultimate goal, he does want to get rid of the Demon Lords, but his ultimate goal is to get rid of Menzoberranzan. That's why he wants the Demon Lords summoned there to just trash the whole place. So there's a little bit of discussion on Vizeran. I didn't say anything. I said, well, you could probably assume he's at least not of, good alignment. And, they were saying something like, I can't remember how the discussion went exactly, but they were like, well, he's a drow or he does this, or he's kind of, and I said, and that means what? And, like, well, he'd probably kill people. And I'm like, and that means what? And they're like, he probably lie. And I'm like, and that means what? And then we went through that for several steps. And then finally somebody went, that means he's probably evil. And I'm like, well, it's possible. I was just kind of trying to, get him to think it through. So just keep that in mind that, he's not he's not Santa Claus, so anyway, okay. And so on the expedition thing, once they got to the Wormwrithings, they moved the scout force up ahead to within bowshot, because they're just in this big system of tunnels. Now the Wormwrithings, that begins on page, let's take a look here on chapter 13. Definitely still read the chapters and familiar, don't use these videos. And I'm not saying you are, I'm just saying on the off chance, don't, go deeper. These videos are meant to be a helpful, accessory to the book, not a replacement. And it's basically a sphere. It's a honeycomb of tunnels spanning hundreds of miles in the northern reaches of the Underdark, carved from the rock by enormous purple worms. And the reason that they're going here is because they need a purple worm egg from the purple worm nursery that almost certainly exists, because there's a bunch of purple worms in this area. But there's also an area in the Wormwrithings called the Vast Oblivium, which is a big chasm in the Wormwrithings, and somewhere in there's supposedly a beholder. So, there's other beholders that have been mentioned in Out of the Abyss. If the players want to try to go get that beholder and get it central ice stock, they can. If not, encourage them to come to the Vast Oblivium in the Wormwrithings. So now some notes here on the Wormwrithings. Foraging is more difficult in the Wormwrithings, requiring a successful DC 20 Wisdom survival check. Fair's Rest permeates only the fringes of the Wormwrithings. While the party explores this region of the Underdark, spellcasters won't have to deal with the effects described under Fair's Rest in Chapter 2. And the tunnels created by the purple worms are tubular. Totally tubular, man. Awesome. And roughly 10 feet in diameter. A typical stretch of tunnel is 1d6 miles long before it intersects with another tunnel or a naturally formed cavern. So, so just think of the Wormwrithings is just this big 3-dimensional area that's hundreds of miles in the northern reaches of the Underdark. There's just this honeycomb of tunnels created by purple worms, and purple worms will use other purple worms' tunnels, but they won't use their own tunnels again for some reason. So they're just constantly creating new tunnels. So now there is a random encounters table for while you're in chapter 13, the Wormwrithings. I didn't go into a lot of purple encounters, random encounters, because for time's sake, I was trying to move them along. I wanted to get to the troglodyte layer and the especially the roper encounter. But yeah, keep in mind, if you want to do random encounters in this area, there's a whole unique set of random encounters. There's a table for chapter 13. There's this really cool purple worm encounter to where either a purple worm comes from behind the party and they have to run in front of it or else turn and fight it. And I think a purple worm has a CR of like 13 or 15 or something like that. It's no small fight. And then they have to stay ahead of it for 1d6 miles, and then they can find a branching tunnel and escape it. Or the purple worm is moving along the tunnel in the opposite direction as party and appears in front of them. So again, they must either reverse course and run, or they must fight it. And again, if they can run within 1d6 miles, they can get away. And then another one is the purple worm is burrowing through the solid rock on a path that intersects the party's tunnel. The worm erupts from the tunnel wall behind the party, then continues on its way. I love this one. Leaving a new tunnel in its wake. So you just might know it's a business. All of a sudden, this big, huge, incredibly killer worm thing just crashes through the tunnel behind you. The worm's passage triggers a rock fall in the party's tunnel, and each party member must succeed on a DC 13 dexterity saving throw or take 3d6 average of 10 bludgeoning damage from falling debris. I love that one. I'm probably going to trigger that one, random or not, on the party. I just love the dramatic effect of that. So just main thing is remember that there are unique random encounters while you're in the Wormwrithings, and that foraging is harder. Now, where we got to on this session was there's a troglodyte layer. This is a set encounter. This is not a random encounter, and they basically, the party and the expedition will encounter this big area, this layer that has troglodytes in it. And troglodytes are basically the cavemen of lizard folk. They're just nasty lizard things that only speak troglodyte and are very, they're basically the cavemen of lizard folk. So, and it's this huge cave full of them. And the party comes on them kind of looking down into the cavern from a high vantage point. And there's two groups that are obviously at odds to each other. And one of them is kind of holding the sword, and there's a captive troglodyte on the other side. And what they've stumbled into without knowing it is there's like a +2 longsword or something like that the chief has. I guess they got off of a raid, or they killed somebody or whatever and took his sword. And there's a division in the troglodytes because there's another troglodyte that wants that sword. So there's a big fight, and they captured the chief's mate, and she's a hostage, trying to force the chief to give up his sword and all this. So this is what they've stumbled on. Now, in basic terms, they can, the party can interfere with this. They could try to bring peace. They can kill them all and take the sword or whatever. There's a lot of different ways this could go. I personally didn't want them messing with the troglodytes. I didn't want to run that fight. I mean, if they press it and they have the fight, absolutely, I'll run the fight for them. But I was gently encouraging them not to do it. And one of the ways I did it is I put a whole lot of troglodytes down there, even more than, with the book, probably doubled or tripled with the book. Says the party could probably still, especially with the expedition, take these troglodytes out. I just didn't want to do it. I didn't think it was that fun or interesting of a fight, especially for a +2 longsword. Now, it's an interesting situation to see, but right in the book, in the map, there's a secret passage that they can bypass this big group of troglodytes, but I put a bunch. I mean, I drew it out. I'll try to put a picture up in the video, and I was like taking my black marker. I was like just trying to show all the dots, because one of the players, was like, let's go, let's start a fight, and they're wanting to throw a javelin or shoot an arrow or charge down in there or something, throw a rock to start a fight. And I kept trying to, man, there are a lot of troglodytes down there. And so there was a lot of discussion. They ended up going through the secret passage. And eventually there's a roper layer in here that I really wanted to have that fight, because I thought that would be an interesting fight. And it was a good fight. I should have dropped another roper in there, but just 2 ropers. And there's 2 ropers and 4 piercers in, I think it's area 8 of the troglodyte layer. And I doubled the piercers from 4 to 8, and I left it at 2 ropers. I should have brought in a third, but it worked out time-wise perfectly, because we finished the fight in time, to finish our session on time. But I really wanted to have that roper fight, and it was like, ropers are nasty. If you have that fight, play the roper to its full ability with all those grapples and bites and nastiness, and they're hard to hit and hard to see. I mean, we even had a player, was like actively, because they were like, oh, we're suddenly in a natural cavern with stalactites and stalagmites, and he's kind of looking around, suspecting something. Rolled a perception. I had rolled a stealth for the ropers and the piercers, and it was very high. Even though he's actively looking, he didn't see. And then they're like, oh, there's a body in here. And everybody's kind of looking at the body. And all of a sudden the piercer started dropping, and the ropers started attacking. And it was a great fight. Felt good to have a fight like that after a couple of sessions of role playing. There's nothing wrong with role playing. There's also nothing wrong with fighting. I like to do both. So sometimes if it's been fight, it feels really good to have an RP session. And sometimes if it's been RP, it feels really good to have a fight session. So that roper fight was a lot of fun. But what I would encourage you to do with the troglodyte layers, make sure to research it ahead of time and determine, how do I want to, if they fight the troglodytes, how do I want to handle it? And if they go to the ropers, how do I want to handle it? And just be aware, because it's a mini, I'm sure I'll put a map of this up, or a picture of this up, of the map, but it's a mini dungeon crawl, just kind of, and it's been a while since the party will have done that. The Wormwrithings in and of themselves are kind of just one big dungeon crawl, but this troglodyte layer encounter, is a mini dungeon crawl. So just make sure you're familiar with it. One thing, I'll tell you some stuff I changed, other than just adding the troglodytes. In area 5, where the secret tunnel leads to, there's a pit in there that holds 6 captives. 2 drow and 4 shield dwarf commoners. These unfortunates were separated from larger groups. See random encounters, captured by the troglodytes. Every couple of days, one of them was eaten by the tribe. The captives are filthy and weak. There's some notes in there on like the shield dwarves joining the expedition. I'm done with more NPCs piling in. I'm done. I feel like that between the first part of Out of the Abyss and the second part, I've really accommodated keeping up with a lot of NPCs. I just, they've got their expedition. And in fact, there's a random encounter here in the Wormwrithings where they can meet like 3d6 more dwarf commoners, and like, they could potentially join your party. And if you want them to, and I don't think it says right in the book, but that's an obvious, people like, hey, join our expedition. And cause they're like lost or whatever. And I'm done with adding all these NPCs. So, I think I just said by the, when they looked in the pit, and there was like 1 troglodyte guard in there, and I think the monk actually snuck up and did a stealth and just allowed him to do a coup de grace for the rule of cool. Even though there's not really a coup de grace rule in 5th edition. Go look it up, kiddos, if you don't know what I'm talking about. Coup de grace. I think that started in 3rd edition, maybe 2nd edition. Anyway, I just said there's like a drow and a dwarf, and they're in the pit and they're dead. And to imply that they use this pit, and they had all, man, they really, squirrel on this pit. Is there a secret room at the bottom? Is it and I just outright said this pit is obviously used like their fridge. They just throw their food in there and then come get it when they're ready to eat. Well, how deep is the pit and how wide around, and is there any loot on the, I'm like, they're obviously not adventurers. They just have like regular kind of clothes on. Well, how can I search? I mean, they were all over this pit and all over these bodies, as groups will do, man. They will just whoop on shiny, and and I mean, I'm just outright saying it's just, there's really nothing there, and but they're all checking this pit out. Fair enough. So, and then another thing I did was in area 7, it's kind of like a guard post, and that I had the guards had already left to go join the fracas, but it was obviously had been just recently occupied, maybe like a little whatever the equivalent of a chair is for a troglodyte had been knocked over, and it was, there's universal signs of like what a guard post is, and this was like a little guard post. And in fact, the one troglodyte guard that's in area 5, with the pit and all that, he was so intent peeking out the tunnel to see what was going out with the big fracas. That's, the monk just and snapped his little troglodyte neck, his little lizard neck, little lizard brain. And also section 6 here is pretty neat. There's an area here with a steam vent. It's a 10-foot by 10-foot by 10-foot cloud of hot steam coming out of a crack, but in the wall through the steam vent, there are precious gems that can be mined. But mining the precious gems has a chance of attracting troglodytes. So, and my party got pretty smart they were using like mage hand and some kind of hammer or something to try to hammer the gems out. And keep in mind, it says, for each round spent digging at the wall, a character has a 10% chance of extracting a gemstone worth 100 GP. And it doesn't say exactly what the gemstones is. This just says precious gems. So just say whatever you want them to be. The chance increases to 20% if the character has a mining background and a miner's pick. Now, I said, does anybody have a miner's background or a miner's pick? And people are like, well, I have this and I have that. And I kept going, do you have a miner's background or a miner's pick? And the answer was no. And so, they just had a 10% chance. But also for each round that any number of characters dig at the wall, there's a 10% cumulative chance. So it keeps increasing each round that the sound attracts the attention of any troglodytes remaining in areas 5 or 7. Well, I've already said area 7's cleared out, and 5 they'd already killed. But for game purposes, if they rolled bad enough, or if I rolled bad enough on their behalf, I would have some troglodytes running there just for the fun of it. So, not done with the troglodyte layer yet, not done with the wormwrithings, but that's where we're at. So next video, the wormwrithings will continue. The writhing is on the wall. That it will continue. Okay, I'm sorry. I would take that back, but I kind of liked it, even though it was horrible. So let me see if I have any other notes here to throw out at you. Yeah, I really tried to make the troglodytes more of a flavor situation rather than an encounter with a fight. But again, if the party picks a fight or a fight, I'll let them. I was like, oh my goodness. I'm like, hey, I've got all these troglodytes down there, to really make the point. Do you want to have this fight? And I forgot that one of my players' characters has the Rod of Rulership. Ding, ding, ding. And, it's like, uh-oh. And let me read you, because it came up and I just like kept my poker face. I was like, but I was sweating. I was like, uh-oh. And here is where, because I'd said they're like, 100 feet away. They're looking down on them or whatever, all these troglodytes. And there was some discussion like, well, do you have to speak a language to use the Rod of Rulership? Do you have to use the same language? And somebody was like, oh, I don't know. And they're like, yeah, you have to be able to speak the same language. So I looked up a troglodyte and they speak troglodyte. And they were like, yeah, we couldn't use it. And I'm like, oh, thank goodness. And then somebody went and looked up the Rod of Rulership and was like, oh, yeah, you can. And I'm like, oh, dang it. So let me read you the Rod of Rulership. You can use an action to present the rod and command obedience from each creature of your choice that you can see within 120 feet in front of you. Each target must succeed on a DC 15 Wisdom saving throw or be charmed by you for 8 hours. While charmed in this way, the creature regards you as its trusted leader. If harmed by you and your companions or commanded to do something contrary to its nature, the target ceases to be charmed in this way. The rod can't be used again until the next dawn. Command obedience from each creature of your choice that you can see within 120 feet of you. No restrictions. No, not up to 20 characters, up to 10 creatures, whatever. 10, not yeah, whatever. As many as you can see within 120 feet. I mean, I'll try to put a picture up again of all the little. I mean, that's how many, feasibly you could be like, I command you, and I don't know if I would just, do one roll or split it up into, I'm going to do 6 rolls and each roll represents 20 troglodytes or something. I don't know how I would do it, but wowzers. I think that needs to be amended. that how that rod of rulership works to a limit or something. But that's crazy. I mean, that's like, wow. So for like the next 8 hours, you've got this charmed group. Anyway, that's crazy. They haven't used it yet. I think the bard took pity on me, the player, and kind of realized that I was like, oh, but so they're like, I don't really want to do that, but it could still happen. Okay. Yeah, I mentioned I changed area 5, so it was bodies in a pit. Area 7, I made empty, but obviously a guard outpost that was recently used. And then I did 8 piercers in the roper encounter instead of 4. And those piercers actually hit a few characters and hurt them. And then last, and this was great, one of the ropers got taken out by wave. The player who uses wave or carries wave normally doesn't use wave because they're not proficient with a trident. But in this case, I think the ropers have like an AC of 20 or something. It's pretty high. Ropers are nasty, even though they're CR 5. I think they should be a slightly higher CR, but anyway, because they have crowd control and they bite hard and they're hard to hit, and they're hard anyway. Okay. So, but one of Wave's abilities, the legendary weapon like Blackrazor, but it's a trident, and it's not, as nihilistically, I want to eat everybody's soul and destroy the universe, by, sucking up all the souls and bringing about the heat death of the universe. Wave is just kind of like, and it wants to tell people about sea gods and proselytize all the time. But it has some cool powers too. It's like +3 to hit and some other stuff. But one of the things, if Wave crits, it will do, in addition to its normal damage, it will do half of the creature's hit point maximum in necrotic damage on top of all the other damage. So the warlock who carries wave was like, so yeah, let me use wave, because they were like, yeah, use wave. And she's like, well, I need a 20 to hit anyway, because I think by this time they'd pretty much figured out the armor class on these ropers. Did it, rolled a 20, and we were like, yeah. And I actually did like this little impromptu booty dance. I was like just all excited. And luckily I came to my senses while one of my players was frantically getting their phone out to record my booty dance. I was all excited. I was like, oh yeah, I was doing a little booty dance. I was all excited. I was like, these are the moments that make D&D great, because we were just like, yeah. And so anyway, and it critted, and it did enough damage that it finished the roper off. The roper's like, and like necrotically just like crumbles or something, and I just loved it. Great moment to end on. So we ended there in room 8 or area 8 of the troglodyte layer. There's still like a drow body that they need to check out that has some treasure on it and stuff, but we will take up next time, still in the Wormwrithings, on the Shane Plays Notes series of Out of the Abyss. Thanks for watching. Please leave a comment and or a thumbs up on this video, if you will. That helps me out tremendously. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll catch you next time on Shane Plays.